Yasan, thank you, man. Thank you, Yasan. I had myself on mute. My bad, my bad. Shalom, shalom, Boca Tov to everybody. Thank y'all for tuning in, man. I really appreciate everybody for um, their support, tuning in. It's definitely critical. And I thank you guys for your support. Thank you guys for your support. Let me get my hat today. I'll rock my hat today. Thank y'all for your support. Shout out to my sister up there in New York, up top. Shout out to my sister Only Love, Dr. Only Love. I'll be having her on the show as well. This hat, I got this hat from her pastor when we went up to New York when I had an event up there called The Balance, and it was an event that brought together Christian leaders, and we had also Mores and Christian and Israelite pastors sitting down. If those many of you have not seen that, um, if you guys have not seen that dialogue, I definitely advise you to go check that out. It had Zion Lex on the panel discussion. Only Love was on there. Pastor Kelly was on there. Some other Christian pastors, some 7-day Adventist pastors. We were just all talking about differences as well as similarities. And it was a great conversation. It wasn't no beef, wasn't nobody arguing, wasn't really no debates, nothing like that. It was great conversation, though there was some disagreements in some areas, but everybody kept it very cordial. And everybody kept it awesome. And that was I think the third one that I had put together. That was in New York. The second one was in Jacksonville, Florida, and that had Pastor Kelly, my cousin Bishop Brock, who is transitioning into the Hebraic culture. He's a pastor there in Jacksonville. And it also had Reverend Randy Sewell, who's also a Christian pastor of a Baptist church who believed that we're the children of Israel. And so that was a great discussion, a great sit down. Of course, it was great. It's a great bill when you can all come together and reason and have conversation, even though you may not disagree in some areas. Everybody, all the pastors and leaders handled themselves very well. The first one that we put together was during the Nehemiah Conference, which was the night before the Nehemiah Conference here in Atlanta at the church that I was a part of before becoming a moray and a pastor within the Hebraic culture. Um, it was held there on a Friday night. It had our brother Ron Shields, aka Divine Prospect, was on that panel. Elder Wilton from the 7-day Adventist Church, Pastor Kelly was on there. Our cousin Jerry Carr was on that panel discussion. That was an awesome discussion, and there was a lot of agreement than it was disagreement in that. Not to say that any of them were any major disagreements like that. But that particular one, part one that we did that had cousin Kelly, cousin Jerry, Divine Prospect, Elder Wilton from the 7-day Adventist Church, and our other brother, man, I forgot his name. He down from the country down there near Albany, Georgia, but we had him on there, and that was an awesome dialogue and awesome bill. We got into the Shabbat. We talked about the Torah. We talked about grace. We talked about the new covenant, aka renewed covenant, depending on what Israelite you talk to. We talked about the old covenant, and then we ultimately talked about Messiah. And so that was awesome. That was an awesome dialogue and bill. Good morning, shalom to everybody that's jumping on. Shout out to Deacon Philip, Yassar, Rishar, my brother, Mr. Black Tastic. Shout out to Mariah and Travis. Hey, shalom. Thank you all for jumping on. I appreciate it. I just want to, before we get started, man, I just really, again, I want to thank everybody for your emails, inboxes. I get people inboxing now that, hey, can you talk? Can you ever reach out to this person? Can you interview this person? So some of the interviews that I have, some of those interviews that are upcoming, and some interviews that I have scheduled already, and those I'll be reaching out to. Some of those are relationships that I've had for a couple of years. Some of them are new relationships. Some of them are people that I don't have a relationship with, but many email and inbox asking me, can I interview this particular person, because maybe that's a person that they follow or whatnot. So, and I'll go look at it and check it out and look into it, and see, because ultimately the interviews is to bring some form of understanding for you guys. I know there's a lot of things out there, a lot of things are said about pretty much everybody on the internet. I don't care who it is. If it's a Christian or Israelite, I'm pretty sure somebody done did a video on somebody. Somebody done called somebody heretic. Somebody done put somebody in hell. Somebody said that person ain't got no salvation. Somebody gonna say, it's gonna be, no matter what, you're not gonna find anybody on the internet that has maybe some type of influence where somebody has not done a video or said something about. So the thing is that, I want to be able to, so you guys can hear it out of their mouths. Of course, their videos or something like that is done on particular individuals, but the interviews are not just, it's not about a debate. It's not a thing of doctrine for me to go back and forth with someone. I used to be in radio before, actually we still have a radio show, but I was also on one of the biggest syndicated shows in Atlanta. I was one of the head of the street team that was a part of that particular station here in Atlanta, or that particular show here in Atlanta. It was called The Spirit of Hip Hop, or Cocoa Brother Live. And I was responsible for making sure that whatever events and promotions and things that we had, those things were instituted. And I got a chance to meet a lot of people. I learned a lot in radio and things like that. And so I know the difference between how to be able to interview a particular person. And you may not agree with everything that they said. I don't think any of us have an 100% agreement. But at the same time, interviewing a person, and you can always find some meat on some bones. And you just spit the bones out, throw the bones away, and then you chew the meat and you take it and apply it. But it for me, it's not, for me, it's more so about making sure that everybody it's a great interview and questions are asked. And that's why at the end of many of the interviews, I leave it up to you guys to ask questions, because there may be some questions that I don't think of, or some questions that I don't have. And many of you have asked some great and outstanding questions, and I thank all of you for those questions. And it's really been edifying to others who may not ask the question because they're driving, or maybe they're just watching and don't want to type in the chat. But you may ask that particular person a question that they've been wanting to know. And so I thank all of you for all of your support, sharing the videos and things like that. And so I really, 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 really appreciate everything that you guys got going on, and the support. So definitely like and share this video as well. We got another great interview. Don't forget, on this coming Friday, I will be having another awesome interview with my brother Young Chimney. I've been knowing Zadok for a while now, for a few years. We've done ministry work together and whatnot. And so, that brother, he's definitely an awesome brother. He's another brother that, people have said things about him as well that may not necessarily have been true for his doctrinal positions and things like that. But he is a part of a group called the Hog Mob, which one of the brothers named Zion, who is in the Hog Mob. I've been knowing Zion for over 20 years personally. Me and him used to do shows and concerts together at churches over 20 years ago. And so I know him personally, and I hadn't seen him in a while. But 2 or 3 years ago, when they had the Frequency Conference up in Philadelphia that I was invited to by my brother Muhammad Tanzamore, Zion was at that conference, and me and him began to talk and just really catch up on a lot of things and things like that. And so him and Zadok has had a personal relationship for a while. So I'm going to have Zion on the show as well, just to talk about, because he definitely understands, have an understanding of the movement, because he has two brothers in the faith that he personally knows, even though he's a Christian, and he understands and he knows the difference, and he knows us and our doctrinal positions, and he knows the fruit that we all have as well. It's a difference between people that don't know you and people on the outside, and people maybe trying to figure out or find out, you know, you know, they don't really have a relationship with you, or they don't know what you're doing, and they're questioning what you're doing and stuff like that. It's a different, and those things there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with people being skeptical. I always tell you, we need skeptics in everything, but at the same time, it's also good to be able to have brothers that know you and know the things that you're doing, and know the track record and the fruit that you have from the things that you've been doing, and the work that you've been putting in for the kingdom. So thank you all again for your support. And so our guest will probably be jumping in here in a minute. We have Pastor Dumisani. He's from California, as well as Pastor Haroun Cohen, who is from Denver, Colorado. And we're going to be talking about their work and the things that they do. We're going to be talking about the Jewish world. We're going to be talking about the Israelite world. We're going to be talking about an upcoming conference that is going to be in Denver, Colorado, and things like that. And so we're going to get into it again. Have your questions on deck. I will. It's always good to have those questions preloaded and whatnot, so that way you can copy and paste them in an inbox, and then copy them, write them down, and then you can paste them. But always remember to put the Q and A, so I know it's a question. Save those for towards the end and whatnot. Moderators, I thank you all for the work that you are doing as well. You're doing an awesome work within the chat and all those things. I really appreciate that. Also, don't forget, if you are in this chat, share this on your Facebook pages and social media, and also don't forget to subscribe to this channel. I'm just now, over the last year, just really have been promoting the channel. I've had the channel for a while and just upload video. I never was just into just really promoting the channel. But once we started going live on YouTube and services, and then people started reaching out and asking stuff, then I started promoting. I mostly was doing a lot of teaching and promotions on Facebook and stuff like that. So Facebook has been where I've been pretty much. But thank you all once again. Also, thank you all, whoever's, I hear that I'm getting love on TikTok from several of these interviews. People are chopping up the interviews and sharing them with Yasharal on TikTok. So I hear that I got a little buzz on TikTok from some of these interviews that I've been doing and whatnot. And so thank you all for the promotion of that aspect. I really appreciate that as well. Everybody who is sharing, liking, and doing all that good stuff. So, all right, it's about 6 minutes till the hour. And I thank everybody for once again liking, sharing, dropping your comments and whatnot. And so I hope everybody ready. This is going to be coming up. And also, I want to definitely, not only Friday do we have another awesome interview, but on Sunday at 11 a.m., we have another interview. And I have two special people, special interviews two special people in my life that's going to be on here. They are my seniors. They're my elders, shall I say, or they're older than me, should I say, but they family. I got my cousins is going to be on Sunday at 11 a.m. My cousin, Pastor Kelly, is going to be on, and my cousin, Pastor Jerry Carr, is going to be on. So I'm excited about that. It's been a while since all three of us have gotten together. The last two times, Pastor Kelly has done a conference in Virginia that was called Upgrade Evangelism, and I was doing teachings on Kemet. Pastor Kelly was doing teachings on Judaism, and Pastor Carr, Jerry, was doing teaching on Catholicism. And so it was awesome. We're definitely looking to do something like that again and whatnot. And so, but I'm going to have them on the show on Sunday at 11, and they're going to be on here. We're going to be getting it in. So definitely don't forget, definitely tune into that as well. All right. So thank you all for your support. Thank y'all for tuning out. Right now we have a brother that he's come into the building. And so y'all know, definitely it's always good. It's always wonderful to have some preachers that's on time. I tell you, boy, you can't beat that. You can't beat that when you got some pastors on time. What's going on, Pastor Haroun? You got to unmute yourself.
Got you. Good morning. Good morning. How you doing this morning, Bishop?
Good morning. I'm just on here, just chopping it up with the family and whatnot. Let me. I hadn't gotten a chance. If you want the link, let me share the link in your inbox. If you want to share that link, we're actually live right now on YouTube.
Oh, okay.
So I'm sharing the link. I just put it in your inbox, and let me send it to Pastor Dumisani as well, and whatnot. So, all right. All right. I think we good. All right. All right. All right. Once again, let me go through the chat. Shalom to everybody. Thank you all for jumping in. Shalom, Obadiah. Shalom, Yasan. Shalom, Philip. Shalom to Mariah and Travis. Shalom, Mr. Blacktastic. Shalom, Mark Baker. Shalom, Mount Olive, Boom, Akron, Ohio. Marah, thank you for tuning in. Marah, Dakota. Shalom, Miss Royal. How you doing? Thank you for jumping in, tuning in. Kim Ya, shalom, shalom. Thank you for tuning in as well. Definitely, y'all don't forget to subscribe, like, and share. We have an outstanding and phenomenal interview. Two brothers on here. Definitely make sure you save your questions and things for last before we get out of off the show. We'll give you an opportunity. I'll be able to read those questions and see if the pastors can answer those questions. They should be there equipped. Deacon Mark Twain, Boom, Jacksonville. What's going on? Shalom, shalom. Well, what's going on, Pastor Haroun? How you doing, man?
Shalom. Good morning. I'm doing well here in the Mile High City.
Doing Mile High City. Y'all Mile High for real. Like, y'all was the first one to let people get high, wasn't you?
Yeah, us in Seattle. Yeah.
Was it Seattle first, or y'all was first?
I was both at the same time, but we were, we really, we really, did. Yeah, that was, I think, 2013, 14. So
Right. All right now. All right. So shalom as well. Plumantis 2069. So we're waiting on Pastor Dumisani to come in. I guess he's an artist, so what do we expect? The artists, they gonna, they always show up, late. They gotta, I guess we the opening act, so he got so we're waiting on the artist to show up. But now Pastor Dumisani, I'm pretty sure he'll be in here in just a minute before we get into it and whatnot. Are you a Broncos fan?
I would say bandwagon Broncos fan. I love the Broncos, especially when they're doing well. But the last couple of years, it has been hard to be on the wagon. So
it's hard to be on the wagon. I can imagine that the city there, because it's probably shuts down. I guess when the Broncos is winning, it's probably another level of energy.
In the
city, yeah.
Yeah, when we had those winning seasons, people are really into the Broncos. I mean, we're a sports city. I mean, have all the sport, but football is really the drumbeat for a lot of folks here. So yeah.
Awesome, awesome. So you were there during the years of Tim Tebow, huh?
During the years of Tim Tebow, yes, I was.
What was that like? Like it's one thing you can see because I'm from Jacksonville and I was there. I left in 2021. But uh, what was that like? We saw it on TV, but I can imagine being in Denver probably was a different level of energy, right?
Yeah, I think watching, at least for us, watching it was kind of magnetic, especially that playoff game where, he made the pass and Thomas ran for the touchdown. I mean, it was a lot of energy during the Tim Tebow years. And, people were really excited, and then, right thereafter, we had the Peyton Manning years, and that
Yeah.
just took it to a whole nother level. Tim Tebow was a really exciting. And then, the Broncos had the chance to go to the Super Bowl and had the winning, a couple winning years. And that was, it was amazing. So, yeah.
Awesome, awesome. Okay, what's going on? How you doing? Shalom, Peggy Shapiro from Chicago. Shalom, shalom. Okay, so we're gonna jump on right on into it, and as Pastor Dumisani comes in, then we'll kind of incorporate him
Sure.
into it. So, oh, there he is. Speaking of Pastor Dumisani. Pastor, what's going on? Shalom, shalom. Okay, so we're gonna jump on right on into it, and as Pastor Dumisani comes in, then we'll kind of incorporate him. I think he may have me. Oh, there he is. Speaking of Pastor Dumisani, probably got to mute me on your end on your YouTube. You on YouTube, Pastor Dumisani?
I am on this. Well, you know what, Bishop? I'm not sure. I think I'm on the Zoom. Am I on the Zoom here?
Yeah, you on the Zoom, but I heard the latency in the background, but it's gone now. It's gone now.
Okay, yes, sir. You know what? That's because I got that on there. My power. Can you all hear me all right?
Yeah,
we hear you.
All right. Apologies, gentlemen. They were wrapping up a video shooting thing and it went a little bit over, so I do apologize. Please forgive me.
Oh, nah, I know being an artist, y'all, that's just how y'all do. Y'all just
Pastor Cowans, I don't want to give a bad impression. You know what? I've been a musician all my life, and no joke, gentlemen. I'm usually the punctual one, right? So I mean, I know we got a stereotype thing of not being on time, right? And I'm usually on time, but I messed up this time, so I do apologize. As the preacher said, charge it to my head and my heart. I apologize.
It's all good. It's all good, Pastor. I just like to clown around and have a good time. But
Yes,
so
yes.
we're here, and I think that this is a great build. I think it's going to be a great conversation, and one that is very. And as we talked earlier, you guys just be yourself, be free. If there's something that I don't ask or whatnot, or we haven't gotten into that you want to kind of get into, feel free to have the liberty to be able to share those things. Brothers and sisters who are watching, as more come in, I'm going to leave them to ask you questions toward the end if you guys are okay with receiving questions, because I'm pretty sure as many of the brothers and sisters who are on here that'll be coming in are going to ask questions and things like that, meaning from the Israelite community. I'm pretty sure there's going to be some from the Jewish community and whatnot. And so these are questions. So I think this talk is very important. So before we get started, I kind of want to just get into a little introduction of you both. We'll start with Pastor Haroun, and who is Pastor Haroun? How did you get into ministry and all this what we're doing? Did you start as a Christian before you got into Torah? What was it?
Long story short, I grew up in a family of faith. Mother, father. Originally my biological father's from West Africa, from Abidjan in Ivory Coast. But my father who raised me was a man of faith, and my mother, she was really on television and radio doing here in Denver, preaching the gospel. And it wasn't really, where, someone drug you to church. It was more so they created an environment for me to have a relationship But thereafter, when I was about 22 years old, I started to, and I remember distinctly praying to the Lord to open my eyes to him more deeply, not out of circumstance, not out of anything else, but I wanted to know him. And interesting enough, 3 months later, I was introduced to the Torah through a ministry called Kodavar, or Whole Word. But right before that, 3 years before that, it was interesting enough, there was an older gentleman in my community. He taught Hebrew. He didn't teach Hebrew to a lot of people, but he knocked on my door one day and he said, listen, the Lord sent me here to teach you Hebrew. Now think about this. I'm a Christian. I'm Kojic, Church of God in Christ. And I'm like, what's up with this Hebrew? But I was taught to respect my elders. So I would go and we would have this one-on-one and I would be praying like, Lord, what is this? And so 4 years later, I started to see that this was God's divine calling me into this direction. And so that was around 2004 when I started to really understand and really open up to the Torah. And it was a great ministry. It was really a small gathering where I could ask questions and answers. And it just was, such a profound time in my life. There was a lot of fasting and praying and for the Lord to open not only my understanding, but just me to go in a direction. And I wasn't at the time wanting to be in ministry. I knew I was called to ministry, but this was more so I wanted to the information I was receiving, I wanted to apply to my life, to study the scriptures. And so for that time, professionally, I wasn't, that was all that I did. And, the Lord blessed me at that time to be able to do that for specifically 2 years, just to get into his word and to study his word and to wake up and really have that time with him. And so, because I had this tension, because I'm also involved in business. I am, full-time, entrepreneur. And so, but the Lord allowed me to be really anchored into his word and really have this relational experience with him. And as the Torah started to be revealed to me, it changed my life, it changed my perspective. And, I would now, I think about, even just a bit earlier to the, reading the Torah and understanding, I was like, what was I really seeing? And now, it's been a progressive journey where, every year the Lord has really been profoundly speaking to me. And I just count it a joy and a blessing to now being not only just exposed, but immersed into it. And so ministry came really a year and a half after. There was a time I was just so excited. I'm learning these things and I wanted to tell everybody. And it was interesting enough, I was driving down the street and there was this billboard that said, not yet. And so, and then I seen these bus signals, not yet. And so I think that was the Lord just telling me, you're not ready yet, because, I have these concepts in my mind, but I couldn't articulate it. But a year thereafter is when ministry really, I started to embrace the call and really be involved in ministry here in Denver, in this community and the various types. And so I'm so thankful for the Lord just being so patient, gracious, but also investing that time and having that process.
Hallelujah. Go ahead, Pastor Washington.
Oh, thank you, Bishop Brown. And again, good to see you again, Pastor Cowans. Looking forward to connecting with you soon, sir, out there in Denver. Appreciate you hosting us and everything. My story is somewhat similar to Pastor Cowans. I grew up in church as a young boy, born in Little Rock, Arkansas, although I grew up in California. We moved from Arkansas when I was very young. We were members of King Solomon Baptist Church, so very strong kind of Black Baptist tradition, if you will. I know there's different denominations of the Baptists, as you know, and also as a musician as well. It's kind of in my blood. My father, I was the youngest of 7 children. My father was a deacon in the choir. My mom was a matron, the whole thing. We were there, church babies, right? We were there 5-6 days a week, right? And so I'm growing up with the music. I'm growing up. My mom literally would say as a baby, I would sit in the front row with her and rock to the music. But when the preacher would get up, I wanted to hear the music. So I would stare at him and start crying and gave him a complex. No joke, they told me this, right? He when I saw him later on, he wanted to know where I was because he figured something was wrong, right? The baby was fine. And I kind of wanted to apologize to him. Like when I was a baby, I didn't know what was going on. But lo and behold, it was the music, right? I'm playing in church as a young kid and just developed a relationship with the Lord at a young age, got saved at a young age, all of that. And again, our parents are very devout. And so it bought us Bibles and everything. But I didn't notice at the time, obviously it wasn't significant at the time as a young boy, when I would read what we obviously used to call the Old Testament, the Tanakh, more than the New Testament. Right? I read the New Testament, steps of Jesus and all of that, but I knew like the patriarchs. So by the time I'm 10 or 11, I'm knowing these Joseph stories and Abraham and Sarah and not really knowing why I'm drawn to it. Right? I'm reading 1st and 2nd Samuel, but I'm more so in those scriptures, and that was just something that was the case. Didn't understand at the time. It was later on, gentlemen, that some things kind of converged. One of those was the whole the nation of Israel, right? The modern state of Israel. 1984 was what was called Operation Moses, I'm sorry, when the Israeli government airlifted Ethiopian Jews from after they crossed the border of Sudan and brought them to Israel. And I was a junior in high school, junior high school, and I was literally getting ready to go outside and play with my friends. We're gonna play touch football, basketball, whatever we're getting ready to do. And I'm only at the door. My mom's watching the news. I turn and I see this broadcast. Right, it's the end. Back in the day, there was three channels, right, through 3 networks, if you will, whatever network it was. They were they're wrapping up their broadcast, and they talked about what was the Ethiopian Aliyah. I didn't know what Aliyah was. I didn't know anything about the modern state of Israel. Nothing. I came up with the scripture part, but I didn't know anything about Israel. But I saw those 2 pictures. One was a Ethiopian woman with her baby on her back, then that wrap that they wear. And another one was a gentleman on the ground, got off the plane, kissing the ground, right? And so I saw that image. It just burned in my brain. Again, didn't know what I was looking at, but I never forgot it. And that was like 40 years ago now, right? So it was a few years later, after my wife and I we're married, and we are actually living in Virginia. We're from California, but I'm in Virginia at this point doing music ministry at a church there. And while I'm there, the pastor of that church is friends with a Messianic rabbi in the next county. And in that Messianic congregation, their musician is making aliyah. So they need a keyboard player, right? And I tell my friends all the time, that's how that happened. I had some dealings with other Jewish people, Orthodox and everything. So, but again, nothing that I could register and say this was something happening, which is, your steps are ordered, as scripture says, right? So it's happening that way. I go to interview and talk to the rabbi about the job, but not because anything had to do with what I felt a calling. I tell people really real. I had a wife and 2 babies, and I needed the money. It wasn't that deep. It was they had church on Saturday. I did all my stuff on Sunday. And for me, it was a way for me to, to put some more food on the table. But God had other plans, right? As soon as I met the rabbi, he immediately knows why I'm there. He begins to just kind of pour me here. The Kadosh is this, Mikamoka is that, the Shema is that. And I'm saying to myself, that's really nice. I just need I didn't say it out loud. I just need the chord charts. You know what I mean? I'm good, right? Give me musician rehearsal. This is what I do. But he knew. He was able to kind of beyond all of that. And they were just the sweetest people, right? There was never any pressure. Hey, you need to do this, you need to do that. I'm just watching them, observing, right? And I'm hearing the Torah being read. I'm watching different things. Now, as my testimony goes, I'm not understanding it, so I'm being judgmental. And I tell my wife every day, I'm so glad I was in my mind. I didn't say it out loud, but I'm thinking, I'm like, oh, what's these people doing, right? They're touching their fingers and they touching the thing. Oh, they worshiping a piece of paper. All what I call all the Christian arrogance, right? Knowledge is being broke off for me, but I'm not really understanding. I'm just kind of watching it, kind of seeing what's going on. But over a period of time, we were there for about 3.5 years. And again, one of the families there, I knew the musicians and their families. They invited me to their Passover Seder and everything. And slowly but surely, I began to understand that I was there for much more than playing the keyboard, right? And it began to transform, as Pastor Cowans said, transform my study, transform my worship. I began to, kind of put some jazz gospel stuff to some of the songs that I was hearing, right? It just did this natural musician thing. So at a congregation that I planted years later, we have our own versions of Shema and Kadosh and Mikamoka, that are distinctly, jazz and gospel, but it was a fusion, if you will. That just happened, gentlemen. And so Torah study, our family embracing Shabbat, embracing the feast, all of those things. I'll say this one last thing, and I'll open it up. That journey for me started around the early 1990s, right? It was 1992 when I first stepped into that congregation, right? And began to see that and experience that. It was a few years later when I began to do research, when I wanted to know more about the Jewish diaspora, right? The Jews from Ethiopia, the Jews from all over, right? And I began to delve into that. And it was also then, Bishop, that I found out about the Black Hebrew Israelites of Dimona, Israel, right? The internet was still a new thing, right? It wasn't like all that we have now, right? There was no YouTube, there's no social media, but there were some websites that were kind of up, going towards the late 90s, if you will. And one of the things I found out was about Ben Ami and his whole community leaving Chicago. So I began to do all those deep dives, right? I would go to back in the day, the VHS tapes, right? I would go and get tapes and get books and study about it and everything. And that's how I found out later on about the different sects of Black Hebrew Israelites. There's many different ones. There's not just one, right? There's this here, you got the UK, you got the United States, you got all of that. So I began to do those studying, gentlemen, at a time when it wasn't being talked about, right? It was just something that either you found out about it, either accidentally, or you knew somebody who knew somebody. So that was my journey. And obviously we're always on a journey, right? We're still learning and everything, but that's how it kind of started for me. The whole Messianic or the Hebrew roots thing started for me around the early 1990s.
You kind of segue us into the next, conversation, because obviously, all of us have talked. And so let's talk about the perspective of Israelites and whatnot. And then we'll kind of go into other areas as well. We'll kind of get this, because both of you have two different missions. But it works. It's good that we all are different within this body and whatnot. And I know Pastor Cowans is more so in the urban area. You kind of deal more so in the international area with the Jewish community and things like that. So we want to kind of talk about that as well. But let's kind of segue into the Israelite community. And many of us kind of have discovered or come into it in different ways, but there were still some of the same communities. Some brothers on the streets in America. You talked about Dimona and these type of things here. And all of us, I want to say this too for those who are watching. Both of these brothers are Messianic in the aspect that they believe in Yeshua. So let's do. They believe in Jesus. So let's make sure that we put that out there as well. So, but let's kind of talk about the understanding of us knowing who we are. I had Elder Sar from Dimona on yesterday, and we had, it was a great interview. But let's kind of talk about us being the children of Israel, and this has kind of been something that the church has kind of shunned over the years. But now we're finding out more that there are many people in the Christian church, pastors, who've always held this belief, but at the same time, it was either they didn't want to be, ostracized and banned or isolated, or they just didn't know enough to present it to the people because maybe that wasn't their area of teaching it. So let's kind of talk about that. Us being who we are as melanated people, and I know people use the term Black Hebrew Israelites and things like that, but let's talk about it. What's you guys' perspective on us being the people of the book, as they say?
Awesome.
Well, go ahead, Pastor. I want to jump in. You want to?
No, go ahead.
I'll
jump in right after.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Yes, sir. So Bishop, and I appreciate the question. So I want to answer that by starting where I started. We're talking about the 1990s. When I began to study this was again, internet is brand new, right? You don't have a lot of resources that are available, at least the way that we're doing it right now, right? Mm-hmm. And Bishop And hats off to you for the conversations that you have, the conversations that you facilitate and everything, because I think this is very, very important. I even told my wife back in the 90s, as we were kind of walking through it, right? Give you a little bit of perspective. When I began to delve through that, different books, I mentioned Ben Ami, but I'm getting books, I'm getting the whole Black Hebrew Israelite thing, and I'm checking that out. And as a young man, at that time, I'm in my 20s, I'm 54 now. I'm in my early mid 20s at that point, right? And I'm sitting there, and one of the things that's happening for me, there is a transformative thing that's happening in that. Among other things, there's this an emotional part where I'm feeling like not only am I just learning these things, but these things have been kept from me, right? Like this is information that I should have, and how come I didn't know? And there's some anger that's building up there, right? And then along with what's happening, I also see some of, in my opinion, later on, I should say, some of the misdirection, if it will. And what I mean by that is that one of the common traits I saw with some of the authors was the teaching that everybody who was particularly in the Western Hemisphere, every Black person, right? West Indies, North and South America, were all Israelite by virtue of the fact that they were part of the transatlantic slave trade. So when I first read that, I'm looking at that, I'm understanding Deuteronomy 68, the whole thing, Deuteronomy 28, 68, the whole thing. And for me, gentlemen, in more of the study, I recognized, for me, that is not accurate. That many were, whether it's the Igbo tribe, there's some others as well, but that in that millions of people, for example, taken in the slave trade, not all were Israelite. That's how I began to kind of understand it. And even talking with Igbo elders, you had my friend Remy Alona on a few weeks ago. I've known him for a while, right? And some of the conversation, ironically, maybe about a week before this, what we're doing right now, about a week or so ago, one of my daughters bought me a DNA thing, right? And lo and behold, most of my DNA is actually Yoruba. And according to what I've studied and my Igbo friends, that's not necessarily an Israelite tribe, right? But this is what I've found out. We're still learning different things. And so that was part of my first thing, Bishop, in terms of the Israelite movement, the Black Hebrew Israelite movement. I call it a movement, but again, there's different sections to it. Right. What I began to see later on was that as the information became more prevalent and folks are reading different things, this is as internet is spreading now, right? You get into the 2000s. What I began to see was clearly for me a positive and a negative track, right? The negative track was what I saw as more of a militant type of anybody who's not melanated is a fake Jew, a Khazar, that kind of thing. And it became very contentious, if you will, right? Like we talked about, some of the examples, brothers on the street, this person's an Edomite, blah, 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 basically much of it being based on color of skin, right? Now, by now, I know who the Mizrahi are, Ashkenazi are, Sephardi. I'm recognizing, learning these things, that Jews scattered to the four corners of the earth, which is a biblical term from Isaiah chapter 11, that Europe, Asia, Africa, and all, what I began to see was on the negative track, there was almost like dismissal of any Israelites or Judeans that were either not A, melanated, or two, or B, had their ancestry traced to the transatlantic slave trade, a very kind of what I saw as a narrow view. The positive that I was seeing happening was that you had brothers, many of them brought up in church, who are reading books like Joel, Zephaniah, and Zechariah for the first time. And this is what I would often tell pastors, because the work that I do in Israel advocacy, I have these conversations from pastors across the country, right? And one of the things we talk about, we separate what I've called for years now, the positive and negative. Here's the negative. There's this almost anti-Semitic, anti-Israel, or if you're white or if you're not quite Black enough, it becomes this colorism thing that kind of distracts us from studying Torah. And then on the other hand, the positive is that there are scriptures, and we tell some of the pastors, there's one pastor maybe about a month or so ago, we were having a very honest conversation and said, you know what, much of what the Black church is struggling with right now isn't just the militancy of what I see some of the errors of the Black Hebrew Israelite movement. It's the fact that we haven't taught the word. And let's just be real, right? If they heard on the street corner this brother quoting Joel, Zephaniah, Habakkuk, and we don't ever read those books in church, part of the first problem is that the first time they heard those books was on the street corner. So, and they may have heard something out of context, but here's the thing, we read Malachi when it's time to tithe. Let's just be real, right? We read Deuteronomy when it's time to get blessed, right? We're not doing a Torah study. We picking and choosing, and then we flip and say, oh, the law is bondage and everything. But you just went to the law to justify what you just preached on. But when I quoted it, now that's what we see is actually happening. That's what I see. It's a contentious thing. But from that, as our Jewish brothers and sisters teach, the klippah and the kedusha, right? The klippah is the outside husk thing that's kind of represents sometimes evil. The kedusha is the inside, the fruit, the thing that's actually there. I think that we're in the midst of right now dealing with both the negative and the positive to get to the heart, which is Torah, right? The heart of it is Torah, the word of God, lamp unto my feet, light unto my path. So, and in short, Bishop, I know it's a long answer, but what you're saying, the Black Hebrew Israelite movement, my criticism has been, this is over years, and just the last couple of days, over years since the 90s, is that negative aspect became prevalent on social media, right? Brothers preaching not so much Torah, but just coming at people, and some of not, this is second cursing people out, and you this, and you not that, and you not going, man. I kept telling him, saying, if you truly study in Torah, David said it's a lamp unto my feet, light unto my path. If you getting more angry studying Torah, something wrong is not with Torah. So Torah is supposed to be giving me some wisdom and some understanding, not making me angrier so that I'm coming at people who either don't look like me, that type of thing. And that's what I've been kind of dealing with across the country. So that's my feeling on it generally, although I know there's more to unpack there.
Right, absolutely. Go ahead, Pastor Cowans.
Yeah, for me, I think as the Lord started to open up the Torah to me, there was also this vibration and feeling of similarly, in the sense of, as a child, I knew that there was some connectivity to the scriptures, but I couldn't articulate it. And so, after a year of intense prayer and as well as receiving the information that I was receiving, then there started to be this research about who are we, right? And so I would research and go look at the commandment keepers that were started by, Matthew, Rabbi Matthew, and some of the others. And then, I seen Rabbi Capers, who's in Chicago, and then also, some of the friends that I knew were that I haven't seen in years, I started to see now, and they were in Hebrew Israel. They were Hebrew Israelites. And so I started to really kind of take a deeper dive and say, well, not only about the possibility, but also how does the scripture look at it from all this information that I'm hearing? Because there's, and as we look, normal Christianity, especially at least I've experienced, because Denver has, a wealth of African Americans and Blacks in the city, but we also were a larger majority culture, right? And so a lot of the time, you would hear, I heard that, that, Blacks were the cursed ones rather than the blessed ones, right? And so you heard about the curse of Cain, the curse of Ham, Canaan, the curse of Ham, and all these other things. And so for me, it started to be able to, I was trying to unpack, what is this really about, really? And if this is true, what is the validity of it? And as well as, how do we unpack this in a way that it is in a godly format? And so, as I engage with some of my Hebrew Israelite brothers and sisters, there was, some of the thing is, as Pastor Dumisani said, some of that was, really forceful. And it was an interesting encounter. But what I could hear is also frustration, right? I could hear, this is what has been placed on us. And there was to the point of, one, I didn't get the information in church, so I got it from the street. And then two, I've also always been taught the opposite, which also propelled me to leave Christianity in a sense. And so I think to the point that Pastor Dumisani said is that, we as a community have not done a great job of opening up the scriptures as a whole to be able to have this dialogue, these engagements. And so I didn't see the frustration all the way as negative. I just seen the frustration as misguided in some ways, right? I remember going to I was in Houston, and I was traveling down the street, and some of the brothers were out there with some signs and everything. And I started to engage with them, and I could hear their frustration. And of course, they started to cuss me out, to be honest. And, I said, hold on, brothers, I know who I am, but at the end of the day, we can't just get to the place where color is the foundation of our faith. Even if I am, that's not the foundation, right? We have to dig a little bit deeper into Torah and living this out, right? Living it out in a way that shows the fruits of the Spirit, living it out in the way that is being able to connect to others, and living it out in the way that the light of Torah, the Messiah, is seen in our lives. And I deal with a lot of it, right? Because I deal in some of the urban communities of Denver. I understand some of the situations, the frustrations, but at the same time, I can't allow the frustrations to begin to shape how I see the scriptures, because what has been given to me in incorrectness cannot be the same way I also now start to fight the world. And I say, oh, if you're white, you're not this. If you're this, you're not this. You're not this. And we're using that. And so, I tell a lot of brothers and sisters is that, who am I to tell the Father who are not his children? Who am I? I know who I am, but at the end of the day, I cannot stand in the place and say it legitimizes somebody else. That's the same thing that has been done to us over the last centuries. And so, I think it's very important that we start to dig and ask these questions, because one of the things is we have to ask, to what Pastor Dumisani said, is we have to answer the question of, we hear a lot of prophecy coming from the Christian community, and I also hear a lot of it in the Messianic community in the varying degrees. But what we haven't touched on is the why. If we had this largest forced migration of people to the Western Hemisphere, we got to ask ourselves, why? Why did that happen? And so what I feel is sometimes we skirt around that. We don't answer that. And so I think we have to do a better job as Messianic believers, as those that understand Torah, to unpacking that. Because what we've done is what I've seen, and I've been on all sides basically of it, is I've seen, we said, this is us. And then others say, this is not you. But then we've said, well, this is what the scriptures say based on our experience. Like when I was in DC, I was there in 2019, and I was in the Smithsonian Museum, and I was seeing all of our history, right? And if we can't approach and start to answer some of these things, we're going to get this great divide. I think some of it is, some frustration is healthy, because it brings to the top some of the things that are, easy to tuck under. Okay, they're not talking about it. I think some of it is healthy, but I think there also has to be a transition of, my frustration has to be given to the Lord. I have to accept who I am, right? And I do believe there is a lot of the seed of Israel amongst our people. I would say that for me, right? I believe so, right? There is a lot of the seed of Israel amongst our people. But at the same time is, I can't just focus on that being it alone. And so, but I think we're starting to have real conversations now, right? I'm very entrenched in the Jewish community here. Many of my business partners, I sat on a board of a Orthodox synagogue here in Colorado. I've gone and had engagements there. But I also, like I said, been involved in the community at a grassroots level. And so there has to be a closing of the gap. And I think if we don't do it, we're going to always see frustration, and then also dismissing, right, who we are. And, and I think it is a time to be able to get to, one, answering some of those questions, engaging, not to be afraid, and then to be able to show the love of the Messiah to all of our brothers and sisters, that we can come to understanding who we are, and then expressing it in a way that is engaging but impactful to all of our community. And so the long and short of it, I believe some of it is exciting to me, to read about those that went to Dimona. It's exciting to me to read about the Limba. It is exciting to me to see that, because too many times we have seen, and I would just end on this, that it has been told it is not us too many times. And so, and I think that it is time to at least be, even in the mainstream, is to be accepting of, hey, there's some great possibilities here. So, and I'm thankful for at least having this discussion. So.
Absolutely. I want to ask this question too as well. I was talking to Rabbi Shapira, and we were having a discussion, and I want Pastor Dumisani to jump in on this, as well as you, Pastor Cowans. But Pastor Dumisani, Rabbi Shapira made a statement. He was telling me that even within the Messianic community, there's a side of racism, within that. So would you like to share and elaborate on that as well?
Absolutely. And let me just piggyback what Pastor Cowans was just saying. Agree completely. And one of the things that I'm excited about, again, in terms of perspective, is that I'm seeing this from the last 30 years, the kind of conversations that are being had, that need to be had, that have been swept under the rug or avoided completely, right? And that we, in our organization, for example, we are connected with the Orthodox Limba community and are helping them in terms of different fundraising, different things that are actually going on and everything. And so what I often call the three branches, and my three branches of African Jewry or African Israelite, whether it's the Eastern, Northeastern, the Ethiopian, the Beta Israel, whether it's the Limba, or there's the Igbo and others, is throughout Africa. Absolutely. You have the Israelite tribes throughout the continent. And that's what we're unpacking. And this has been exciting for me as well. Bishop, yes, I have coming up in church and having the opportunity, came up in a Black Baptist church, but over the years have been either musician or lots of different places. The Messianic community is not immune. I've seen racism. I've seen just sometimes out and out racism, sometimes the more subtle kind or whatever. Yes. And what I've come to see is that I haven't seen it in a many more of a degree than I've seen in different churches, right? White churches, sometimes mixed congregations where there's not the understanding and sensitivity type thing there. So for me, I was able to kind of over a period of time put it in the light of me seeing what I've seen in terms of church, right? That, in other words, a church or a congregation may be Messianic. Torah is its base, right? The observing of the feast and all those things, but people are people, right? So people are people in Israel, they're people in Ghana, they're people in the United States. And so what I found was that when it came to that, I saw discrimination. I saw people kind of, the congregation we were first in, my wife and I were two at that time of one of the only Black families. A couple of other Black individuals would come. Over the 3.5 years that we were there, when I was telling you about my first Messianic experience, other Black families began to come, no doubt because they saw us, right? And then they began to come in over the next 2 years. By the time we left and returned back to California, there were about 3 or 4 Black families in this congregation that were not there when we first got there. And over the years, I've gone to Messianic congregations and seen many multi-ethnic congregations. But in coming up, yeah, I saw that. We saw people questioning people's identity, questioning why they were there. And I'll go further, not just in terms of the Messianic congregation. I'm talking about, I've been to Israel organizations, right? I remember, I'm not going to call the name of it, not the one I used to work for, but another one. My wife and I went to this event in the Bay Area. We were invited by a couple of Jewish friends of ours to come, and we went there and we checked it out. It was a pro-Israel organization, and there's different presentations and everything. And I've been in many, many different settings, right? So I'm used to that, was all Black, mixed, or just mostly white or whatever, right? So the way we kind of raised, we kind of roll with whatever. Like I tell my congregation all the time, I don't mind if I'm the only one who looks like me in the room. I would mind if it's not cool that I'm there, right? If I get the vibe that I stepped in and they nobody look like me in there because they're not supposed to be there, that's a different thing. If I'm just a guest and they had nobody who looked like me, that's one. And I can tell from the vibe you give me, am I welcome or not? And I can tell about you look at me, shake my hand, the whole thing, right? It's not that hard to tell. I'm at this particular event, and folks, some hello, and some folks staring at us like this 2000, whatever, right? This ain't 1950. Why? I'm black in San Francisco, right? What you look with, right? That got on my nerves, right? At some point, no joke, somebody walks up to me and said, you know what? If nobody else is glad you're here, I'm glad you're here. My wife and I looked at each other. He's like, we think we having a moment up in here, right? I hope I'm video is not. Oh, did it stop?
Now you're good.
Can you hear me, Bishop?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, good. Yes, sir. And it was that kind of night, right? Now, this is, it's a Jewish organization and everything. And so, and was that always the case? No, but I've seen those kind of cases. So whether it's Messianic congregation, whether it's other kind of maybe other Jewish affiliated types of thing, yeah, we've definitely seen it. And we've definitely had to discuss it. I've had conversation with my friends who are Jewish or different ethnicities, whether they're African, whether they're different Middle Eastern descent, and they've talked about some of their things as well. We've kind of compared notes, right? I remember a good friend of mine who's actually of the Mizrahi Jewish. Her mother is from Iraq, father is from Egypt, very dark skin. You wouldn't know, but this wavy hair. So if you just looked at her, you wouldn't be able to tell, right? Are you Latina? You couldn't tell, right? And she would tell about her experiences, right? She would go into a synagogue that was mostly Ashkenazi, and they would ask her who she was and how was she Jewish, the whole thing. There were offensive questions to her, right? She said, I'm from the Middle East. And she would get frustrated and she would say, look, Abraham and Sarah were not from Poland. She said, my people go back 3,000 years to almost 3,000 years to the first destruction of the temple. We were in Babylon. And so we've had those conversations, right? Some of them might be more nasty and mean, and some of it just ignorance, right? So these are other Jews who are talking to this other Jewish woman who has an ancient history, right? And they're wondering, and why are they asking her these questions? Because her skin is dark, right? So yeah, we've seen those things. I've experienced them. And I've seen them myself and everything. So absolutely. So to answer your question, Bishop, I've seen them in the Messianic community. I've seen them in the Orthodox community. Absolutely. Is that me impugning? No, I'm just saying I've just seen people be people, right? Just like I've seen some beautiful people, some of my best friends, rabbis and different folks, like they're wonderful people, beautiful people who would go the extra mile for you, do whatever. I've seen other stuff as well. So yes, sir. So I hope I'm answering your question, Bishop.
Oh, yeah. Go ahead, Pastor Cowans.
Well, thank you, Bishop. I would say even, the same, that I've seen it firsthand experience. I was in seminary school and, I'm the only one. And just like Pastor Dumisani says, I don't mind being the only one as long as you're okay, not even okay, that you understand I am here just like you, right? And so I'm the only one. I'm like, okay, I'm in seminary school, and this seminary school is teaching. This is their first class of Messianic Judaism, and so there's folks from all over that flew in to take this class. And a very prominent teacher is teaching. I'm coming back from lunch. I sit by myself. Everybody else gathers together. I sit by myself. I'm fine by myself, right? Come back from class, and two of the students are having a discussion about the economy here in Denver, how it's so robust. And this is about 12 years ago, And the gentleman says, and I kind of chime in. It's an older gentleman, and they're both white gentlemen. And and I chime in because I know about real estate. That's what that's what I do professionally. And so I chime in. But then the guy turns back and he says, well, I'm so glad I'm here in Denver because in North Carolina, you got two kind of blacks. Now I said, wait a minute. My ears perk up, and I say, wait a minute, two kind of blacks. And I said, let me pause. Let me just figure it out. And so he says, we got two kind of blacks, right? And I'm in seminary school. And so I'm like, okay, you got two kind of blacks. He says, you have the blacks that will steal your head off. And I remember this clearly. And then he says, then you have the good blacks that follow the white Christian way.
Oh, man.
Right?
Oh, man.
Yes, sir.
Right. I'm in seminary.
Yes, sir.
And so people are coming back, and the teacher, a very prominent teacher, I'm not going to name his name, and I was very disappointed by his response. So I stopped the class and I say, is what we're doing? Right. And I have to address it. And I address it with tears in my eye because I'm in a place of, I'm feeling that faith is the center, but I have to acknowledge that even in the place that you feel faith is the center and the Most High is being revered, that this is still an issue. And so I address it with tears in my eyes. And, you know, then, and I have to leave. It's a Thursday, but we're supposed to go to this other rabbi synagogue. And so I show up at the synagogue, and what's what was impactful in a negative way was, as I show up at the synagogue, after I had tears in my eye and I expressed to the class what it was, right? Everybody kind of moved around it. They got into politics. The teacher started talking about Barack Obama. I said, man, I'm not even caring about this. Let's deal with this issue. Mm-hmm. I don't want to talk about the politics and what Barack Obama, that's not what I'm talking about here. And so when I get to the synagogue, you know, a couple comes up and they say to me, you can't just wear this chip on your shoulder. And I said, listen, you may not have been in the class. And the guy was right there. And I forgave the brother. He came and he said, hey, can you forgive me? I'm sorry. And I thought about it. So I, you know, forgave the brother. I said, I didn't just bring race up. He did. But it was this mindset that I'm always carrying it. No, I have to be cognizant of it, right? Because I'm, you know, I was even thinking of it. I understand I was the only person there that was person of color in the class, but it also comes up. And so having experiences like that, I mean, there's other experiences, you know, of course, but that was kind of one of the things that I was kind of taken back, that the response of it, and as well as it happening, I was like, man, we still have a long way to go to just be able to engage in a way that just acknowledging our humanity first, right? I'm not just even saying that we're just not even getting to a place of acknowledging us being it, just acknowledging my humanity. And so there's been many brothers and sisters that I love that have, you know, that beyond race is been beautiful. And I will say that, but just dealing with it in these settings, it still tells me, and you know, it still puts your antennas up. I mean, I've been in places where I haven't even been acknowledged, and I'm the pastor, right? I just had an event, and I'm putting the chairs out, and, you know, of course, I'm, you know, one of the only, and, you know, I don't even, it's like, well, he's the help. And it's like, come on, man, we got to get past just that. Right. And, yes, sir. And, you know, and then, you know, get past also the politics. Like you know, you feel, you know, sometimes there's this tension, especially in this last year, where, well, Haroun, where do you feel falling? Are you, you know, evangelical Republican? Are you left? Like, I'm about the kingdom, you know, I'm not, you know, and I'll say this, and I might offend some folks, but I'm not your poster boy to be, you know, some people may love Candace or not, but I'm not Candace Owens. Right. You know, I am Haroun, and I'm going to speak from the kingdom perspective. I'm not going to speak from your political perspective or what you want me to speak from. I'm going to speak from, you know, a biblical perspective. And so I think there's still great tension there, but I think there's also the overwhelming from the community that I've also experienced, where there's love, there's engagement, there's honor. Even from my pastor, Pastor Michael, who's a senior pastor, I know he took a chance to that. You know, I lead the Shabbat. The Shabbat is, I lead that.
Hold on, real quick, Pastor, before we get into that, because that's going to be my next question. I don't want you to go into it too fast. All right. Okay. So I'm going to come back to that. Okay. And Pastor Dumisani, I want to ask you, and after that, then Pastor Haroun, you can go into it. But your organization, what do you know, it kind of explain the concept of it. I know it's kind of, you mentioned the term to me, geopolitical in some aspects, I guess you would say. Some of the lectures I've heard, you say you referenced Dr. King and some of the movements and things like that he's done. But talk about your organization and how do you guys fit within the structure in today's time?
Sure. Well, so in 2013, gentlemen, I started an organization called the Institute for Black Solidarity with Israel. I started it a few months after my first trip to Israel in 2012. Now, by 2012, part of the other story I was telling you, this journey had started in the 90s, like I said before, kind of coming up to that point, or even started when I was a child. And there was two passions of mine that developed in my young adult life. That was both Israel and Africa. And then like a Pan-Africa, right? I mean, we homeschooled our kids. And by the time my oldest kids were like third and fourth grade, they knew all, at that time, 52 nations of the continent, all the capitals of those nations, the different demographics of them and that type of thing. And then a lot of what was some of the current political types of things like that. There was just something, just a passion of mine, along with Israel. These things got fused later on. You don't know what God is doing at the time. It didn't make any sense at the time. So my first trip to Israel as part of this group, Christians United for Israel, which I was a part of for a while, I was on staff for a while. I went as a guest. They invited me. Wonderful people went there, went to the Kotel, the Western Wall, and had what I can only explain as a divine appointment at that moment, right? And one of the things I really said strongly was to come back, strengthen the relationship between the Black and Jewish community, knowing full well that some are Black, Israelite, and Jewish, that whole thing, that study had already begun for me, right? But in terms of the tensions that could sometimes be there, as well as Israel-Africa, right? There's Israel-Africa Alliance. And so did some research and everything. Didn't know how I was going to do it. I would tell my congregation often, if God's placed something on your heart, because you have no idea how you're going to do it, right? He said, do this. He said, okay, well, I need you to help me make some sense. And so I eventually start this organization, and that is its goal, to continue to strengthen those ties between the communities, both here in the United States, and then when it comes to Africa, Israel. So one of the things that we do, Bishop, again, it started several years ago. For the last few years, it was more just a social media presence and everything, because I was on staff with CUFI. My son is the executive director of the Institute for Black Solidarity with Israel. Last year, I left the staff of CUFI to return at a full-time spot with IBSI. And to do the work that was being demanded. And then had to not talk about the geopolitical, we deal with sometimes very difficult issues, right? Not to be controversial, but because we try to deal with them as clearly as we can. There are reasons why there's been such a strong synergy between the Black American and Jewish American community, not just during the times of Dr. King and the Civil Rights Movement, but a generation before that, starting with Booker T. Washington and Jewish philanthropist Julius Rosenwald. These guys come together. They wind up building 5,000 plus schools throughout the segregated South for students who otherwise would not have had access to them. And there was reasons for that. That man, Julius Rosenwald, his rabbi, he lived in Chicago. His rabbi was M.L. Hirsch, who kind of encouraged him in this work. And we talked about that synergy. And so we talk about lots of different things. Among those things, Bishop, we talk about the issue of the modern state of Israel. Again, that in and of itself can be controversial, but we talk about particularly how the state of Israel and the political issue has been used as a weapon against the Black community, particularly since 1948, but especially since the 1960s. And so we give that history, but not just to teach history, but to teach, as we know, studying Torah, right? Why do we study Torah? Because it's God's word, right? And one of the things we see in Torah, it tells you what's happening. It causes you to understand what's happening now, right? The Torah reads like the front pages of a paper, right? You go to Torah, you see the wisdom that's actually there. The same thing is somewhat true, not on the same level of Torah, obviously, but when you study history, what we call in our organization authentic history, you see patterns, right? You see things that have come up before, right? I told my kids sometimes, I'm only 54, but sometimes I feel like I'm 100, not because I think I'm so smart, right? But because I've seen these patterns and I'm going, okay, just wait for it, boom, because it's the same thing, right? So what we had, for example, just as one example, and I don't want to take all the time, this pandemic year of 2020 was a convergence of many things. Obviously, the whole COVID and both the virus and the media stuff, right? I'm saying all the things together, what was happening in terms of the medical part, what was happening in terms of the political, all these types of things coming in. And then, of course, race, right? George Floyd is killed in May of 2020. And you have organizations, which include Black Lives Matter, that are protesting, that are bringing awareness. Well, again, our organization, this is what we do. What I mean by that is that we are aware of what's going on the street and what's going on across the country, the stuff that's legitimate and the stuff that's not, right? And when I'm talking about stuff that's not, you have folks on the street blaming Israel for police brutality, right? And there's reasons for it. I can't get into all the details, but this is old. This is old. And I'm talking about old. You can go back to the 1960s when Yasser Arafat, who is the second chairman of the Palestine Liberation Organization, his focus was the Black community. He goes straight to people like Eldridge Cleaver and Stokely Carmichael, and he goes to what Dr. King called the militant, or I guess he called the militant. They called themselves the militant. You remember you had a traditional civil rights movement, which was the Dr. Kings and the A. Philip Randolphs, and then you had the Younger Lions, right? They're like, any means necessary. We tired all this nonviolent struggle for change. We want this now. So you have that tension that's there. As we were talking about before, not all tension is bad. Sometimes you're kind of pushing some things along, right? Unfortunately, what's happening at that time is that the younger ones, not all of them, but some of them are getting pulled into a very anti-Semitic, anti-Zionist, things are getting conflated. It goes from justice here in the street, Oakland, LA, Chicago, whatever, and it becomes a Palestinian conflict type of thing. So folks are wondering, where is this coming from? It was injected by folks who had an agenda to use Black people in this struggle that was 10,000 miles away as poster children, right? This is what was actually, and I'm not talking about what your feeling was. Well, you consider yourself pro-Israel, anti-Israel, neutral. That's not my point. My point is that regardless to what your thoughts were on it, or if you had no thoughts on it, your voice was being used globally, right? Folks are making money off of standing next to Black folks saying, this is what the Black community feels. And again, back to this whole spiritual part. Why are folks paying all this money to have Black folks be? It's almost like what Madison Avenue does. Why did you give shoes to Michael Jordan? You don't care about Black people. You want to sell shoes. And this becomes the most important person. I'm not saying nothing bad about him. I'm saying that's what business is. Business is, I'm trying to sell my product. I know that Bishop Brown has 5 million followers. I come to him. I have lunch with him. I want him to wear my hats and wear my shirts. Why? Because I want to sell my product, right? So why did the anti-Israel crowd choose the Black community to sell that product? Because of how powerful we are. They knew that if they stood next to people who represented justice, who represented civil rights, they could sell this movement as something that would be legitimized. And the Black community has been exploited in that way for decades. One of the things that our organization does is both point that out while we talk about the importance of a strong Israel-Africa relationship, those types of things. So that's some of what we do in our organization, Bishop.
Hey, man, awesome. And at the end, I'll have you give that information out as well.
Yes, sir.
Pastor Cowan, I want to talk about this because, I'm pretty sure all of us are familiar with Jews for Jesus, right? We are familiar kind of with Jews for Jesus, this whole, Sunday service, but then they have the Shabbat, those within that, they keep the feasts and, all that good stuff. Kind of talk about, you guys' ministry and I saw the kitchen, how many people you guys feed. You guys do a great work in the city where you're at, but kind of talk about, I know you lead Shabbat, and I think Pastor Michael, we have first day of the week service as well, right?
Yes. And so I came to church in the city about almost 6 years, right? So I've been there almost 6 years. Church in the City has been here in the city of Denver almost 30 years under the leadership of Pastor Michael and Brenda Walker. And it first started in a old Safeway building or a grocery store. And as you alluded to, and there was a video was just telling about the history that there was a synagogue right directly just less than a block and a half away. Developers were going to develop. And I used to, interesting enough, I play basketball. And so I used to play basketball. I never went to the church when it was in the grocery store, but I played on their basketball courts all the time. And so, and that's what it was known for, is just being really engaged here in the city. But they moved across the street about in 2009 is when they did a total rehab of a synagogue that is now this year is going to be 100 years old. The ministry was, of course, it was church in the city, but as they moved to the synagogue, Pastor Michael Walker, who is from New York, his grandfather was a rabbi, and so his grandfather had a synagogue called Beth Abraham, And so he knew it was important to recapture his, not only his heritage, but also to be able to engage in it there at Church in the City when they moved into the synagogue. They were doing Shabbat nights when they were over there at the old grocery store, but they wanted to have a more entrenched with a Shabbat service, and really exploring the Messianic heritage there, that those that believe in Messiah but understanding Torah. And so that started back in 2009, and that was the vision, that they weren't not going to stop doing their first Sunday services, but they were adding this because they knew it was important to have both. And so I came 6 years ago because there was another leader, he had left. And so under, the influence of my mother and my wife, I mean, I didn't really, interesting enough, I was like, no, I don't want to be in formal ministry. I was at the time I was doing ministry in community centers, because I really wanted to make sure that our community and the communities around really had access to ministry. Right. And because, I have a nonprofit that I founded that dealt with gangs and gang violence and in the community. And so I really thought it was very important. But as this influence of my mother and my wife, I finally listened, and Pastor Michael and I had come together. And so I do lead the Shabbat service there, which has been a wonderful experience and a blessing. To partner in ministry with Pastor Michael, and just to have a vision for the city. And as you talked about before, because what I've seen is that there was such a synergy. They are not just interested in doing ministry on Sunday or ministry on Saturday. The synagogue is open almost every day of the week. We even pre-COVID, we were doing morning manna, so we were feeding the homeless every morning. Also providing lunches and as well as food to those that are looking for food, a place to get some of their needs met. And so I love that about Church in the City, that it wasn't just ministry for the sake of ministry, but they were also doing the work. And so we still do a lot. And then we also partner with other ministries. So when you come there, on some Sundays, there's, the Indonesian church is there. Because they use the synagogue. There is also the South Sudanese church there, and so you get all of this at Church in the City. And so it's just been a wonderful thing to be there, to lead the Shabbat service, and as well as just to be involved in a ministry that has a heart for the city, a heart for people, and most importantly, a heart for God, and to display the Torah in a way that is applicable but practical as well. So
hallelujah. Now let me ask both of you this question, because we're almost there.
Yep.
Basically, we're about a week away from shoulder to shoulder. So let's kind of get into that. How did that come about, Pastor Cowan? It's going to be held in Denver at Church in the City. Pastor Dumisani, how did you get on board, and how did all this come together? Pastor Cowan, you want to go ahead and then Pastor Dumisani, you can follow up.
Yeah, interesting enough, and I'm so thankful for the men of God, and I'm thankful for both of you. I thank you all for just heeding the call of the Lord, especially in this important hour. And so, I think for me, how it started is, I had seen Rabbi Shapira. He did several years ago. He had a book called The Kosher Pig. I picked the book up. Right. Very insightful book. And so I had met Rabbi Shapira about 3 or 4 years ago. We met in person. I'm in my polo sweatsuit at, a Messianic association meeting. And I just got off the plane. So I'm just being me. And so he and I are talking, and we're conversing. And so I started sending him messages. But what was really profound was last year, right? When you have COVID happening, you having, the murder of George Floyd. And during the time, and which I thought was very interesting, is when you see at the precipice, the height of the protest happened during Shavuot last year, right? And so Rabbi gets on and he starts to speak that the Lord has spoken to him about Africa and African Americans in a way that he never seen. And so I sent him a message right after. And I said, "Wait a minute, man. You have stepped into an area in which I believe God's speaking to you directly, and that's where my heart is." And so we started talking even more succinctly about, and I said, "Listen, we have to do something, and we have to do something soon." And so that's just been on his heart, and I'm so thankful to God for him, his leadership. And he said, "Well, what do we do?" And so that is kind of the genesis of how Shoulder to Shoulder came to being, and it was about it's less about just having ministry and less about just a conference, but more so about what the Lord is doing, especially in this hour. And so it's just been incredible to see just a snowball effect from that time to now, and it's just an honor for the Lord just connecting his people, and to be even connected with you, Bishop, and you, Pastor. It's just been an amazing thing. And so I just see God doing some amazing things. And I don't think this will just be the only one. I think this is just the first of many, as we're seeing. And so I'm just elated for this Shoulder to Shoulder conference, and thankful to see this come into fruition, and thankful for the laborers to make this happen. So,
absolutely. I concur. I want to again thank Pastor Cowans, because he'll be hosting. We're in his host city, so we're coming there for this event. Like him, I met Rabbi Shapiro about 3 or 4 years ago. I live in North Carolina now, but we just moved about a year ago. Like I said, I lived in California all my life, with the exception of when I was in Virginia ministering for a few years there. And we have a Messianic congregation. We often call it a Hebrew roots congregation, different terms, if you will, but we keep Shabbat and everything. And at some point, a young lady joined our congregation who's part of his yeshiva. And that's how I kind of got connected to him. She told him about what we were doing out there. And then he and I, it's so funny, he at some point preached in our congregation, but when he did preach, I was actually in Ethiopia. I was overseas. And so he was our guest minister and everything. And then so we never connected, right? I mean, we talked to each other on the phone and everything. And he even stood on the bima and preached everything, but we had never connected, but physically. But we did over this last year, when I wrote my book, Zionism in the Black Church. It's actually the second edition of that book. Our mutual friend gave it to him and made him aware of it. He read it graciously. I mean, I was very moved that he did it. I know he's very, very busy and everything. He writes and travels and everything, and actually made the book part of his yeshiva. There's a class that's called Israel, Africa, and the Redemption that we're actually doing based on the book. And so that was my connecting to Rabbi. When he told me about Shoulder to Shoulder, I was all in. I don't think that there's anything like this, Pastor Cowans. Somebody can correct me if I'm wrong. I've seen different conferences, whether Orthodox types of things or other Messianic type of things, but this one that's dealing with the Black community and the African and Black, I don't never seen this. And like I told Rabbi Shapiro, when I heard his message, Pass Through the Gates. Now, I heard a lot of his messages. I followed Pearls of Torah and everything. And let me just pause and say, I have been enriched by whether they're Orthodox or Messianic rabbis unlocking Torah, right? Studying and getting wisdom from them and everything. It's just been amazing. I would tell a story, but I don't want to distract myself. But just the other day, I was talking to an Orthodox rabbi about something. He dropped a pearl on me. I was like, and I've said this, and I'll say it here publicly. Been saved all my life, right? I've learned more about my faith in Yeshua since my connection with the Jewish part than I ever did coming up in church. And that's not a disparaging of my pastors, right? I'm not in any way disrespecting these mighty men of God who poured into me, but I didn't really understand my faith in that context until God began to do what he did with Torah. And again, and I owe a great deal to those rabbis, both Messianic and Orthodox, who have spoken into my life and kind of, took me under their wing, if you will, learn all of those things. So having said that, Bishop, this conference, when Rabbi told me about it, again, was all in, very much wanted to be a part, because again, as Pastor Cowans was saying, there's something God is doing in this hour. one of the things that I'll go back to that. He said, pass through the gates. I told Rabbi Shapiro, he preached about a year ago, right? I told him, I said, you are the first rabbi, Messianic or Orthodox, that I've ever heard deal with this issue biblically when it comes to Africa, when it comes to Black Americans. I said, as I'm listening to him, right? And again, having heard him before, right? I looked at my wife, I said, back this up. I've watched that message several times, because when he's unlocking Psalm 68, unlocking Isaiah 11, and he's dealing with these things that, again, that go back for me to the 90s, right? I'm kind of digging through these things as a younger man. Now, obviously, he's giving it on a different level because he's going, I'm not fluent in Hebrew, right? And I don't know the sages like he does. And so I'm listening to him as a rabbi. But as I'm listening to him impart it, much of it is resonating because what God has been saying to me for decades, right? And I told him, I said, you're the first rabbi I've ever heard really begin to deal with that. The fact that he's not African, he'll joke and tell you, he said, look, I'm not African. I'm African-American. He said, but God put this on my heart to do this. And so, and I know Pastor Cowans feels the same way. We respect him for that, right? You stepping into something that not only is deep and can be what quote unquote controversial, you're not even Black. Let's just be real, right? Amen. So you're coming at somebody who's not even Black and you're putting yourself out there, right? So you have double the stones thrown at you, right? Just because you are dealing with something that some might feel you should not be dealing with. Yes. But that's part of the heart of Rabbi Shapiro, right? Because he's not doing it to be the next whatever. He's doing it because Hashem is saying, hey, do this, man, say this, deal with this, everything. And so the fact that this conference is coming up, I think is so important. I've never met Pastor Raleigh Washington. I saw some of the names on there, Pastor Cowans and some of these other people who are going to be contributing. I'm excited about meeting these other men and women of God. I have had the privilege of meeting Pastor Juanita. I can't remember the last name right now. Please forgive me, Pastor Juanita. But I had a chance to even preach at their congregation a couple of months ago. They invited me up and everything, had a great time. So I see this as a moment. One of the things we talk about often, and I'm sure we probably get into it at the conference, when we deal with this with our organization too, even though IPSI is not a religious organization, there's a foundation that we're standing on for why we're doing what we're doing. And we tell them often that the first international relationship that ancient Israel had was with Ethiopia, right? The Queen of Sheba. And they say, oh, Sheba wasn't Ethiopia. She was from the line of Cush. Folks, I sometimes get in debates with people. I say, just do the genealogy, right? It's the same part. And well, not only do we know about that story, when it's now, not only is this an African nation, is the most powerful and wealthy African nation at that time. As she travels to Jerusalem, and among other things, declares that God loves Israel forever. This is the first time this happens, and that ever happens even since then, right? And it happens as a result also of prophecy. Solomon's father, David, prophesied that the tribute shall be brought out of the land of Ham. Basically, he said Mitzrayim. He's talking about Mitzrayim and Cush, right? He names these lands as the Bible calls them the quote unquote land of Ham. He said, this shall be brought. We tell people it was this African queen who showed the world how to come to Zion. And we talk. So as Rabbi is breaking this down in terms of both African Israelite and also just Africa and its standing with it, he's explaining this. I'm sitting there watching going, I've been kind of meditating on this stuff for the last 30 years. This is the first rabbi I found kind of begin to touch on that. That's one of the things that resonated for me when he talked about shoulder to shoulder. I said, yeah, I want to be there. And again, I'm just grateful for the people who've been organizing it, because I know it takes a lot of work to make that, to pull that off and everything.
Absolutely, absolutely. Do you guys ever have anything you want to share in last words? We're about to get ready to close out here. I'll just say this before it slipped my mind. Pastor Dumisani, go ahead and give your information out about your book, where they can pick it up, the website, all that good stuff.
Absolutely, Bishop, and I appreciate that, sir. So the book is called Zionism in the Black Church. It is on Amazon and Barnes & Noble and everything. If you type that in, you can also go to our publishing website, which is Umdeni Press, UMNDENI Press, UMNDENI Press, umdenipress.com. And you can order it there as well, all the different ways that you can order it. And it's also on digital, so you can download it on your Scribd or on your Kindle and that type of thing as well. And then if you want to know more about our organization, Institute for Black Solidarity with Israel, just simply go to ibsi-now.org, ibsi-now.org, and and you can join the emailing list or just give us a shout out and we'll give you information, all the information about what we do and even how you can be involved as well.
All right, Pastor Cowans, do you want to go ahead and share the information?
Yeah, so our information is just www.churchinthecity.org. That is where we do ministry, and just thankful. And just the last words, just really thankful for, as Pastor Dumisani said, just thankful for Rabbi Shapira for really having a vision, and really thankful for a man to really stand in a time that is necessary, right? And he was here in Denver last week, and it was a room full of brothers and sisters, and he was really, they was giving him a lot of questions, and just for him to take the time, I think that says a lot about his character. And so we need more people with character, right? That is not after anything else, but after the heart of God. And I'm thankful for, like I said, for you, Bishop. I'm thankful for you, Pastor Dumisani. And, I think this is just a beginning of wonderful relationships. What this conference is doing is bringing relationships together that I believe are going to have long lasting benefits to our community and the world, and as well as everyone else. So I bless you all and thank you all just for your participation in this moment in time.
Absolutely.
Bishop, one last thing I forgot. I know I did forget the shoulder to shoulder. I think the website is, folks who want to know about the conference, you can come, you can join it online, or you can get there with us in Denver. I believe it's shouldertotoshoulder.com, and I want to make sure I'm saying it right.
I'll put it in the chat, but it's
okay. Thank you, sir.
Yeah. Description. It's shoulder 2021
yes,
.com. I think that's what it is.
Okay.
But I'll add it in the chat. Also, before we go, were you finished, Pastor Dumisani?
Oh, yes, sir. I forgot to say that part, so I apologize. Yes, sir.
Okay. Also, brothers and sisters, we're going to take a couple of questions for the panel here before we get out of here. We got a few more minutes to take those questions. If you can, go ahead and drop your questions in there. I'm pretty sure many of you probably had your finger on the screen ready to click paste to add. Make sure if you're asking the question to both of them, don't put any name. But if you're asking the question to one of them, just put their name in parentheses. That way it can be addressed to who you're trying to address it to. Don't forget to put Q&A, so I'll know it's a question and not a statement. Sometimes you can type and people forget to put question marks and they put period. So I just want to make sure that we do that. So let's see here. Okay, that was a statement. Okay, go ahead for your questions. We open it up now for the Q&A. All right, we're just waiting on a few of them. I think they're probably a 30-second delay or something like that, maybe behind. You can also, too, if you guys are on the YouTube channel, you can also probably see in the live chat as well if the question comes or whatnot. But we're just waiting on them to drop those questions. But other than that, I mean, I'm excited about it and see. Okay, there it is right there. The first question from CT. I guess this is for both of you because he didn't put a name. He says, how do you feel about linking up with European Israel for instructions as opposed to our own people coming together? You guys want to answer that question? You're probably going to get some daggers in here, y'all. So
yeah, it's all good. It's all good. I'll start, and I'm assuming what he means by European Israel, he's probably talking about either Ashkenazi Jews or
right.
White Jews, that type of thing. And obviously, I'd already spoken to it earlier. I have no problem with it, right? I mean, for me, wisdom doesn't have a color. The word of God says that wisdom cries aloud in the streets. It doesn't say black wisdom cries aloud in the street or yellow wisdom. So those rabbis, those men and women of God who've labored in Torah, even as Rabbi Shaul said, they are worthy of double honor. That means nothing to me. I've gotten wisdom from Ethiopian Jews. I've gotten wisdom from Igbo, Israelite. I mean, seriously. And for me, it has enriched my life, right? So That's not an issue for me. As a matter of fact, I did a sermon like that, one of Rabbi Shapira's Shabbat services, and it was during the Torah portion. I can't remember right now, but it was the one when the sons of Korah rebelled against Moshe, right? They were upset with him. They didn't like him. They were tired of him. They wanted to go back to, and we were talking about it. I think the title Hashem gave me was "Stop Talking, Start Listening," right? And we kind of connected it today. So when you have that thing where I can only receive wisdom from somebody who looks like Pastor Cowans, but then somebody who looks like Rabbi Shapiro walks in, I cut him off. I'm cutting off myself, right? Because I don't know how Hashem's going to speak to me. And I used to tell our church all the time, if you think you're deep because God spoke to you, God spoke to Balaam through a donkey. So while we get all up about who God speaks through, he could speak through whoever, right? And I found that when we are respecting who that rabbi is, right? And again, go further, even if they're not necessarily a Christian pastor, right? I mean, he might drop something on you, right? If we're open to hear, then I believe God can fill us, right? He can give us knowledge and understanding, as the word of God says. So and short answer to the question, I have no problem receiving wisdom from our Ashkenazi brothers and sisters because it's wisdom. I want to hear whatever God is saying.
Amen. I mean, mine is short. Pastor Dumisani said it, succinctly, is that, you have to be open to all, right? Because you will cut off your blessing, right? When you only say, well, I can only receive it from just a certain place. And so I think it is time for us to open our minds and our hearts to receive the word, right? If the word comes, the word comes. No matter who's teaching it, no matter who's bringing it. And so I've, as Pastor Dumisani said, I've learned from a lot of rabbis, a lot from all different places, a lot of pastors from a lot of literature from all different places. And so I would not cut off any of that richness that God has for my life for the sake of someone's color. So I am, I'm willing to receive whomever shall come. Thank the Lord that he's delivering it. So I totally agree with that.
Hallelujah. Shout out to Donla, the podcast. Shout out to you as well, brother. All right. Any other questions? Anybody got any more questions? I see a lot of comments. Great interview. There was a lot of agreement within a lot of you guys' statements. Okay, question from Elder Fenton Ramsey. He's from Boom. You better make sure this question is good, brother. You're gonna set you down. Q&A for both pastors. What is your short view on how shoulder to shoulder fits into biblical prophecy?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think, biblical prophecy, where you read in Isaiah and Ezekiel, when it talks about the regathering of his people, I think shoulder to shoulder is a deposit of that, right? We can't just look at as prophecy as something that we're just saying, well, God, you do it. He uses and he partners with humanity. And so, as the scripture says, and, I repeat this, it says now in Hebrews 11:1, it says, now faith is the substance of things hoped for, right? So we hope for the regathering of the exiles. Well, faith is the substance. And so what do? We put that in action. And so our action and activities are centered on the promises of God. And so I believe that this shoulder to shoulder is a major deposit, especially here in our country, in our world, to see that us coming together, to see us uncovering some of these truths and to spark and to be catalytical. So I just think it's just a true tremendous blessing that is just not a conference, but it's a part of promise.
All right, awesome. Shout out to Michelle Locker as well. Thank you for your support and logging on. Hey guys, don't forget again to like and subscribe. The brothers are giving out information. If you're in the Denver area or near the Denver area, California, or anywhere like that, definitely come out and just come. If you're a skeptic, come out. Come out and check it out. I think it'll be a great move for anybody that's skeptical about it. I think that's it. Does anybody else have any more questions or?
Bishop, could I just interject just really quickly, along with Pastor Cowans was saying, I too, again, this is a prophetic moment, and something that he actually said earlier as well, when we're talking about specifically in terms of the Black community, right? You're talking about everything from historic lies like the curse of Ham. You're talking about folks, for example, the legacy of slavery, all of those things. There is a spiritual deposit when it comes to the Black community that has been there for anybody who's observed history. And I believe that there are some things that are being addressed in terms of the Black community that will resonate, like you said, around the world. This is, I believe, another thing with our African brothers and sisters joining in with this. I believe this is a moment. I believe, again, in terms of scripture, that there's a reason why you have this Misraim and Cush discussion when it comes to Israel. There is a role that Africa is to play in the redemption. I believe that with all my heart. I have for a long time. And I believe part of what this conference is a touching on that. Again, there's, as Pastor Cowans was saying, this is the beginning of a long journey, right? It's a powerful, powerful beginning. But I believe, among other things that's happening, there is a call on the Black American community. There's a call on Africa when it comes to Israel, when it comes to the redemption. It's there in the scriptures I shared with Rabbi Shapiro said. I think this is the beginning of unpacking that in a real profound way with all these men and women coming together. So I'm excited for that reason as well.
Hallelujah.
Man.
Awesome. So I guess with that said, brothers, if you if all hearts and minds are clear, look forward to seeing you guys here. The time is, we're almost up on time. Actually, I kept you guys longer than supposed to, but thank you all for jumping on and tuning on. Thank everybody that's in the chat. Thank everybody for watching and tuning in. I appreciate all of you. Thank you for your support, like and share and whatnot. And so thank you guys. Look forward. This Friday, we'll have another great interview with Zadok. He'll be on. And of course, Sunday, we'll have Pastor Kelly on, as well as Pastor Jerry Carr, both of my cousins. So thank you guys for tuning in, and feel free to continue to email me for interviews and things like that. I'm pretty sure they'll be back on the show again. I'll have them back pretty much after the conference. We'll probably have a conversation about what took place then. So thank you all for everything. And brothers, if you would stay on for about 5 minutes, I'm going to go ahead and end the live. Thank you guys for tuning in.